What is up, guys? Welcome to SRDev. With me on the mic is my good friend Nikolai.
Also sometimes going by the name of AppFellord. Hello.
Or Nick / AppFellord. And our motto is make games. You gotta make the games.
What a motto. I think Karen's gonna be a little mad at us for stealing that.
Well, it'll be a game-based motto every time.
Yeah.
/ development. This is SRDevs or dev. Well, you'll look at the title and you'll know what it is. This is the first episode. Yeah. The point of this is for Nick and I to just sort of ramble.
Like, I think this is like a wondrous thing where we're starting like a new idea, and just by us two alone being here, I think the dynamic is going to be a lot different to what the usual SRcasts are. I think, or I can imagine, it could be anything. We could just like start off with a joke, and then the entire episode is just going to be like fun banter. Yeah, I just don't know. But
right,
at least in my head, I imagine it being a lot more like oriented towards advice, or like I'm not sure if this is the correct word, but like philosophical stuff around the process, the creative process, and a lot more just, a little more, oriented towards that. I don't know if you also saw it the same way, Klabss. Maybe.
Yeah. This is insight into the minds of two game devs. Yeah. We're gonna show you our trade secrets. We're gonna talk to you about things we hopefully haven't already covered too much in the podcast, the SRcast. But I think we'll get more into the nitty gritty here, and also, maybe we will just get sidetracked by something completely random. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's a glorious, beautiful new world. Hopefully, it will not go the way of SR Dice. I really like SR Dice.
I really love that too.
To be fair, that one was really structured and required everyone to be super in tune. And I don't necessarily know we had the chops to do a whole role-playing podcast. It's something I'd like to explore again in the future, but maybe we'll have to maybe edit it how we do it. This should be a little less prone to the issues SR Dice had, because it's just another basic SRcast, but it's just Nick and I, and we're talking about game design and development.
Like, I don't have to throw a map into the project and then to chop bits up and assign them to each segment of the thing, which was fun and cool and interesting. But if I didn't do that, I feel like it would have there would have been a lot missing.
It's interesting. I would say I feel like SR Dice was a success, even if it didn't continue.
If anything, we got Ellis and the Allies out of it.
Yeah, and right. we got some cool ideas. And listen, we're talking about development right now. We're talking about the development of SR Dice.
Yeah, the development of SR, ScratchRunning by itself. I feel like
this is true. We're on track.
Oh, this is also something we should say beforehand. This being a new format does not mean that it's replacing the SRcast or or making the SRcast appear less often or anything. This is just something we do on our off time, if you can even call it that. Just because we want to. And will there be more of these? Well, for one, if we're having fun just talking, which I do think we do sometimes, then for sure. And then, of course, if you enjoy it particularly, or if you say, hey, this is something I would love you to talk about, that could also be an idea.
Yeah, I think user input here will also be great, if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Leaving comments about game design advice, or just advice on projects you're working on. I mean, this is a development podcast. We could even look into a project at some point and maybe talk about the structure of the project.
That is clever. Somebody said hey, this is a big project I work on, or hey, this is something I'm working on. Can you talk about it, or do you want to talk about it? I guess.
Yeah.
Talking about big projects, with the end of the Comet Adventures 4 project. I feel like there's been let me like directly start with a question so that we, like 6 minutes in, we finally actually get to talk about some stuff. You've been working on Goomble Gurt 2, decided like halfway through either you were not like, you were distracted by whatever this was, or you said you did it like actively, but sometime during making Goomble Gurt 2, you said, okay, I'm gonna start with like, what was it, Comet Adventures? That was the first thing that like deviated from that? Because you were like making small projects here and there, but like, what made you go from, okay, this is Goomble Gurt 2, just making the game and making it the best it can be, to, okay, I want this story to include the community, and then somehow like get that back on track to Goomble Gurt 2? Or was that never the intention from the start?
Here's the Goomble Gurt timeline. Alright. I'm
Gerting of the
like
Goomble.
Sophomore or junior high school, I make Goomble Gurt 1.
Yeah.
It gets featured on front page, blows up. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm gonna make a sequel.
Yeah.
I'm in high school. I'm in my senior year of high school. I don't have a lot of time for it, but I get a fair amount of it done. The game is going to be called The Community Fork at this point. It's a bizarre role-playing game where you collect experience and the characters become like sentient, and there's going to be a lot of endings, and this is when I first come up with Aethys. This thing that turns like that takes the behavior of like characters who have enough experience and starts making them like act automatically. This is where I make the bell ringer. I start getting some ideas about like the meta aspect of Goomble Gurt and how it could connect to the player. All right, I'm in freshman year of college. I get a lot of the combat engine done. And then I encounter a terrible thing where I can't put the name of lists. I can't change the name of lists.
Right.
Which I was banking on. It didn't work. I think they changed it, or I had a misconception. I know you used to be able to do it, but you could not.
You mean like where you could, you don't mean that you can just rename a list, but that you can, in the block where you call for a list, throw in like a join block or something. Yeah,
or use a custom block name.
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to be able to select a different list while I was coding. It didn't work, and I got really frustrated. I kept trying to fix it over and over and over. It just didn't work. I basically just scrapped it. And then I started work on Goomble Gurt 2 again. I got some of it done, but then I got distracted by code breakers.
Of course.
And I put a lot of time into code breakers, and I put a lot of time into it, and I wanted to have I was just trying to appeal as much as I could to actually get myself into it, because I already put so much work into it. I thought, I was like, can I please just get into this thing?
Yeah.
It felt ridiculous that I had to do that, but I figured something I wanted to do was Comet Adventures. So I take some of my ideas from Goomble Gurt to my original, the Community Fork. I take some ideas from Community Fork and I put them into this comic, and I start expanding on some ideas that I had for the Candlesmith. I already had Candlesmith Cafe out. I was thinking, like, how does a candlesmith create coffee? How does a candlesmith's mind work? What is a candlesmith?
Yeah. So that's where more of that happened, like the theory crafting into that.
Yeah. And so I finished the comic, and I've got like a million ideas. And I think I kind of want to use some of my ARG aspects from Community Fork. So I'm gonna do that with Xylus. Xylus was gonna originally be part of Community Fork. So I guess if you'll note, the account is like 7 years old now. It's a very old account.
Yeah. I always wondered about that. Like, at what point did you make all these accounts and then decide to bring them back?
Well, Xylus is one of the only like really old ones I ended up using. I might have some other old ones, but unfortunately, I don't know if I have the passwords anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm going to be able to use them. Anywho, I do the Xylus stuff, and I start thinking, like, how can I tie... Because I've already used a lot of my ideas I was going to do for Goomble Gurt 2, Community Fork, into this. I'd like to tie this into Goomble Gurt somehow, so it doesn't feel like I'm just taking those ideas away from what I was originally going to do.
Right.
And I decided to kind of go about it in a sneaky way. I didn't show my cards until very late that I wanted to involve Professor Pistachio and the other, characters of consequence into this.
Yeah.
And so I had an idea how I wanted to do Goomble Gurt 2 at this point.
Ah, okay. So at what point are we now after the ARG?
So like after ARG, after Common Adventures 1, I'm like, I have an idea how I want to do Goomble Gurt 2 in concurrence with Common Adventures. But then I keep doing Common Adventures. And
it's fun.
It's fun. It's something I can do in my off time. I'm getting into my college quarters. I'm starting to do harder and harder college work. At the same time, I'm making a lot of the Goombles. I'm starting theory crafting some of the story. I figure I want to make Goomble Gurt 2 about the end of the universe. Mm-hmm. And then I sort of start writing these endings, and they're not super satisfying to me. Like they and some of them connect a little bit to Common Adventures, but this game is a little more standalone. And I realized there's a lot I want to do with this idea of the end of the universe, and I already sort of brought it up in Common Adventures. So I decided, what, I'm gonna bring that plot point back and just gonna bring it back into Common Adventures. That way, people feel like they have more agency over it. That way, people are more engaged with it. By the time I get to Common Adventures 3, I was on a long hiatus. I had to do a lot of schoolwork. I get it done fairly quick once I am actually doing Common Adventures 3. I get to Common Adventures 4. I'm like, all right, I've set up all of this stuff about the end of the universe, and I realize at this point, like, my original plan for Goomble Gurt 2 doesn't really make sense as a concurrent game anymore.
Yeah.
Like, if we're gonna have a Goomble Gurt 2, it's
so now is the point where you just say, like, okay, so we're going, like, full, now I'll just, be guided by whatever happens in the Common Adventures?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I had like ideas that I brought back some ideas from Community Fork into Goomble Gurt 2. There were going to be like other players connected through like the internet that you would like talk to that are actually NPCs. I might still try and do like some sort of encapsulation of that, but it was a lot more like meta-y in that aspect, that there was like this alternate world of players and you were one of the players. And you were all kind of fighting over something. And instead I'm sort of redirecting that into like, okay, the universe is going to end. Everyone has their own ideas on how the universe should end and how it should like continue after it ends. And you're the only you're one of the only people who's going to be able to actually do it. So everyone's fighting over you or trying to like take your power. Yeah. Which meant I had to scrap a fair amount of Goomble Gurt 2, but I feel like a lot of the essence is there. I'm also a lot more satisfied with like my gameplay loop idea for Goomble Gurt 2 now. I like the idea of there being stats. I like it kind of playing like it's its own comment adventures where you, the player, get like to choose how the adventure goes. I think it's going to be really fun.
I think so too, and people it already proved to be such a great like concept, because when you said, okay, I'm gonna, I just continued making Common Adventures to have the people engage in that, because people did engage in that a lot. I think Candle World, I think I've said it on your final project about it, or like not final project, but where you like go over it a little, that Candle World is like one of the coolest things I've ever seen like happen in the Scratch community. And even though it's like, it's a bubble, right? It's not like that all of Scratch noticed this, but it definitely brought in a lot of new people. Or maybe you can tell me if these people that like actively joined, if they were new to you or if you knew them already, like they were older followers or whatnot.
I would say as we got into like Common Adventures 3 and 4, most new people were like friends of people who were engaging with it a lot, and they wanted to get it. They saw their friends doing a bunch of Candle World stuff and they thought it looked fun, so they wanted to join. I'm really happy with what it ended up being. I'm so happy so many people were inspired, so many people have made really cool ideas and projects. And I think it has made people think about like life a fair bit. I will say, I was expecting more people to like understand how the ideologies were working, and I expected more people to have ideas for them. But I think a lot of people see the current universe we live in, and it's hard for them to think of anything else. It's difficult for like your brain to imagine what a different universe with different laws would look like.
Absolutely.
And so it's a really hard question for them to think, how can I improve upon existence?
Yeah.
You know, like there is unnecessary suffering in this world. Yeah. Someone can be born and suffer for like 4 years and then die. And that's that's an immoral thing that happens in our universe. No one deserves that. How do you change the rules of the universe so something like that doesn't happen?
Right. And I think that was one of my, like, not problems. I would never call it a problem, but one of the things that made me engage less in Candle World. First of all, like, I guess time is always a thing, but if you present to someone like a completely new idea, and some of it was really like cryptic to me, right? Like all these like keywords, I guess, like ATUS, you called it. Like I never directly understood what it meant until your final project, which is a very late like time to do it, to understand it. Of course, you can imagine what it is simply by like context, right? But it was never like a lot of these things were very abstract concepts to me. And so I followed Comment Adventures and looked at them every time you gave them a love it. But I never knew, like, okay, but what should I decide now? Like, is this, like, what are my options even? And they are so, like, they are huge. You can do anything, and of course, not all of it is gonna work or even be heard. I think that's something that a lot of people, as you said, may have, you know, not grasped directly. Right?
And I don't. It's hard to blame someone.
Yeah.
Part of Candle World is I wanted a lot of these things to be kind of abstract and kind of vague. I
that made
think
it
there's
more
a lot of
mysterious.
I think there's a lot of value of not knowing and having to come up with your own definition. The thing about ATUS is that you could always just define it as power. Like if you wanted to, you could just say it's like your power level is really high. You have a high ATUS energy level, and the other things it did, you could just be like, it's like magic, you know? Like you can use ATUS to make stuff, you can use ATUS to make things happen. You know, it's power that lets stuff happen. I think there's a lot more to it, but that's also, it's difficult for me to even describe it. It feels like it's just an aspect of this alternate universe that I would have to write a book about in order to explain, like, all the mechanics that this universe runs on. And I wasn't necessarily interested in just like spoon feeding all that information to the audience.
May I not change the topic a lot, but like just maybe go on a different track here if you don't mind?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because you just mentioned something that I kind of resonated with right now, because I actually wanted to ask something similar to this. You said you could write a book about it and stuff. When we mentioned the idea for this like format, from that point onwards, I started to, every time I was like talking to people or you know, just consuming media or whatnot, I started to write down ideas for questions I wanted to ask you. And one is, do you read a lot? Just like or have you read a lot? Do you read books or at all? Because I can say right off the bat, I have read so little in my life, like read books. And just recently I picked up a book that really inspired me, just like a book on the creative process. But to you, the question, do you read a lot, or has there been like one thing that you read and that was great?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's difficult for me to form an answer because I have two opposing thoughts in my head about this. I'll answer right ahead and say no, I don't read a lot.
Yeah, okay.
And part of my brain is like mad. It's like, you should read more. You know, reading is really good for your brain. It makes you write better stories. It like enriches your neurons, gives you new ideas. And I've learned something about myself is that I have ADHD.
Yes. yes.
Which makes it really hard to focus on reading a book. I'll tell you what I can do, and the studies have shown this is a perfectly fine way to consume a story is audiobooks.
Oh,
I can
yes.
do an audiobook for sure.
Yes.
There is not less value to an audiobook. To insinuate such a thing would be to say like a blind person can never get the information out of a book that someone else could. So,
Correct.
Right, an audiobook is good.
Yeah. So that is your preferred way of consuming consuming a book.
I wish my preferred way would be reading it with my eyes, but
yeah,
I can't. I can sometimes, but I have a lot of difficulty with it.
I think I can relate.
What I am able to do too is if I'm listening to an audiobook, I can kind of just do a mindless task while I'm doing it. So maybe I'll be like mining in Minecraft or just sort of jumping around in Minecraft, almost like I'm walking in circles in real life.
You're the TikTok thing where it just we mentioned this on the last podcast, I think, or quite did. It's just a silly thing where it's like just do something that feels or that does not take too much off of your or like that does not need your attention too much.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess listening to the audiobook becomes easier. Is that what
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that is the TikTok parkour side video where they'll have two videos playing at once and one of them is Minecraft. I wouldn't say I've gotten that far. Listen, that gets me real bad. Like if I'm watching a TikTok and it's like, am I the jerk for destroying my fiance's wedding cake? I, 58 male, am getting engaged to my wife, 20 female, and I hated a cake and I crushed it. And if I'm watching one of those and it's got some like little Subway Surfer on the bottom of the screen, some dude jumping on the blocks, I can't look away, man. I can't look away. It's like an ontological trap. I stare, my eyes are locked on. I can't do anything.
It's so crazy too how like the platform of the people making that, I mean, that all that has evolved from the knowledge that gets us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's such a strange way to be tricked into watching something. It feels so unsincere and I'm kind of happy that I have been able to stay away from like TikTok and YouTube Shorts.
Please do. Please stay away.
Maybe I'm falling into my own trap of like trying to think of myself as something I'm not, or as like a higher being. I can resist.
I'm immune to propaganda and the mind controlling effect.
I sometimes like randomly watch a short or something, and then I catch myself like being stuck in that. But the good thing is I do catch myself, and while while watching and scrolling, mindlessly scrolling, doom scrolling, what is it called?
Yeah.
While doing that, I know what I'm doing. I know that I'm in this like loop, and I'm almost. It's like I'm watching myself watching these things, and like laughing about myself. Like, this is quite interesting. This is quite captivating. This guy should really do something about this. But no, then at some point I actually am able to find an end. But I've stayed away from downloading the app or actively visiting shorts, which I guess helps a little.
It's very smart. Very smart.
Yeah, to get back onto the reading thing, I don't know why I had this, or I just wanted to ask you this with do you read a lot, or do you consume a lot of or do you listen to books or whatnot? Because the direct thought that fueled that was because the stories you write for Candle World are so cool and so engaging and whatnot. I think if you wrote a book, like you said, about ATIS and stuff, I would really love to read that. I don't read at all, but I would love to read a book written by Klabs.
Oh, thank you. That's really interesting. You say that, and it makes me realize where my actual skill is coming from. It's not actually from reading books. It's from running D&D games.
Yes.
because
that makes much more sense.
Yeah, I don't run Candle World much like a narrative, like a book, very much. I run it like a very slow moving role playing game.
It also where I sometimes feel like, you know how as a dungeon master in D&D you have to there's like a clear path for where they should go, but then somebody just decides to run into the forest and see what they can loot, and so you have to think of something. But in Candle World, I still feel like sometimes you have more control over that. You can build like actual walls and just redirect the story to where people should be. Or is that something? How free have you felt in Candle World, or how free do you think the people?
I think I get it. I think I understand. I would say I when it comes to getting comments, I have all the control, right? I pick which comments I
yeah,
pick.
Right.
But Candle World does not work as a really like healthy, very easily digestible narrative like a book would, and there's a reason. And there are certain things I don't have control over, and that is when I guess I'd call them the advanced players, the players who don't just leave comments, but they go off and like make portals and try and go and, you know, stab the entities or go betray people or give information to characters that shouldn't have information.
Get like the marks and stuff.
I can't control that. That just happens. And so, you know, when people go out and just do that, it just becomes part of the story now, whether or not it was narratively satisfying.
I see.
I would say the biggest example of this was the Marquess coming to invade Vogue space.
Yes.
I felt like this made a perfect sense. It was like, okay, the Marquess failed in like the ARG to do something. No one saw it in the comic. So the Marquess is, and I've set up that this character exists at the end of Common Adventures 2. So they're gonna come in here and try to rescue Kraz. Immediately, everyone was like, nah. No, we're not. I don't think we're gonna help her. I don't think this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And so she fails. Right?
But that was also people were so like they had the preconceived idea of like new characters with a lot of power. They have been tricked before, so they probably were more cautious this time for a reason.
To be fair, she was very friendly. No one thought she was like the bad guy. She was probably one of the closest allies to the players.
Yes.
They talked to her. She was hostile, but she was kind of silly. The reason they didn't want to help her is they thought it was going to kill Padzel, which I don't blame them. I think that logically makes sense, but it ended up making a kind of strange narrative note where like I set up this huge invasion plan, and then several pilgrims betray her, several pilgrims leave her, and so she loses in like 10 panels. Because I'm not running this like a story. I'm running this like a role-playing game, and she lost the battle, so she lost.
So there's that arc.
Yeah, right. So it's like the whole arc ends very, very quickly. Other arcs like that end very quickly as well, just because of like the player has the answer right away, right? Sometimes, or they do something interesting that just ends the conflict immediately. You know, Kenrick summoning Moop Aberrell to go to the Overknower was such a shock to the Overknower that they lost the fight to Kraz immediately.
Yes, right? Yes.
Because it's like, also, I'm gonna reward that because it was clever, and it would absolutely throw Overknower off of their game.
Also, the whole fish ideology thing.
I
feel like that took a little more time, but I still feel like that was a thing that was instantiated. Like the fish ideology was, you know, decided on.
Yeah.
And then all people wanted to do was get away from it.
Everyone.
And then, so that felt like a thing that was like, it's exactly like a little arc. It was like, okay, we have this thing, okay, and we're trying to get away from it again.
Yeah, fish ideology is interesting to me because it revived people, right? I gave an opportunity for a bunch of people who had died.
Dude.
It was interesting to me when the people who died came back to life and then went to go accost the fish. It's like this fish just resurrected you.
Yeah.
Why are you mad at the fish?
Like people said, I want to die.
Yeah.
I do want to die. Why do you leave me in this forsaken place?
Yeah, the fish took that to heart. I think the people had some of the most input on the fish. The fish changed their ideology depending on people's arguments. Something that happened that it was almost like a miscommunication, I would say, because so Kenrick or Corvo entered into the role play. Amazing artist.
Can I be honest? I don't even know where they came from. Like how did Kenrick? And maybe I'm missing something that you explained in the project. But where did they come from? Did they just start making stuff for Candle World and then
they did, and it was so strange. Their name was Itinerant Corvid. I just introduced the idea that you would have alt accounts that acted like different people. I was like 80% sure that was him. Yes, quite. But
me too.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They are not him. Yes, quite. They're a different person. I know. I know. I also was there. But what happened was, because Candle World is very ambiguous, and because the rules, a lot of it's based on perception, they set up an ideology that didn't really work within the confines of the universe. A big part of ideologies is how it's supposed to be about how the universe is ran. What he basically made was a philosophy, which was about how you should live your own life in the universe. And then he also, he set it up in a way that technically wouldn't work canonically. So I was like, okay, this didn't get set up right, but I'm going to make this conflict later that's going to be interesting, where his ideology is going to get stolen away, and then he's going to fight for it and make it all strong. But because there's like a veil of no communication really with me and the players, the characters just do these things. It came off as me punishing him, right? Which makes sense. Because it's like, oh, I worked really hard, I drew a lot, I made this cool thing, everyone liked it, but for some reason it didn't work at all, and the fish was offended by it.
Yeah, I remember.
But it's because it's difficult to convey, the fish would find this offensive, and this ideology, and also the Overknower was being taken by the bad guys, and the Overknower controls ideology. So it's there was so much going on behind the scenes. And it made me realize there's such a critical flaw to me running this ARG role-playing game with 1 million players. Because if I was running a D&D campaign with just 5 friends, this isn't something I would necessarily do. I would want to tailor the story to the players. I would want the players to feel cool,
so that they have the most fun.
Yeah, exactly. I would optimize my game for fun, but Candle World doesn't do that. I kill people all the time. I turn them into meat. They get kicked out of the game. They for the entity will just kill them arbitrarily. This is a brutal role-playing game, and I think Corvo is used to a good role-playing game, and I wouldn't necessarily call the ARG elements of Candle World a good role-playing game.
Just imagine you're playing D&D on hardcore mode, where just talking to the wrong person at the right time just instantly ends your run.
Exactly, and then you can't play anymore, and it's there's a good and bad to that, because it makes the stakes feel real, but also it can take away a lot, and it can make the player feel really crummy, because it can if the player put a lot of work into a thing, they're going to feel really bad about it. That's part of why the fish was there too, right? It's no one actually dies anymore, you just kind of change. And so I was hoping that would that was one of the reasons I brought the fish in, is that I felt kind of bad for the players who'd been waiting over 2 years to play again, and I was like, you know what?
That's one of the coolest ways to do it, by the way. That is one of the coolest ways to do it.
I'm glad. I'm glad it came out. I'm glad people really liked that.
Yeah.
I would say probably my favorite thing in Candle or Common Adventures was the last chapter of Common Adventures 3. I love the fish monologue. I love the music. Yes. I had a lot of fun making that. But it made me realize I don't think I'm ever going to do one of these again, because I feel kind of bad.
Yeah. I feel bad. You don't want to hurt people, or have people not have fun.
Yeah, and
it
made sense that they wouldn't have fun, because I was killing their characters, and I was punishing characters for rules they didn't understand, which sort of goes against the player GM contract. At least if they don't go into Candle World with that expectation. So if I make another ARG like this, I'm probably going to make it so before you can play, you have to press a button that is your character could die at any time. Just so people don't, just so people don't like feel. Yeah, it's like because I think Kendrick is probably like an amazing role-playing game player, and they're older. They're an older person, and so they went in expecting a traditional some of the boundaries that would be in a normal role-playing game, and I realized that was something that I would improve on going forward, is making the boundaries more clear on like if players are gonna die easily, or don't have player deaths be so permanent, or don't have like punishments feel so punishing.
Yeah, there's definitely some ideas for, well, maybe you go to the fish. Maybe the fish is still an entity, but you have to go to the fish and bargain with them to make them revive you in a lesser form or something, so you're you are revived. I don't know how, this is me speaking in non-Candle world like terminology, I guess. But I can say that this whole like the fact that the stakes were so high made it feel like really magical in a way, like really like bigger than the sum of its parts, I guess.
Yeah, it felt like you were playing a real person. It was supposed to feel like you were playing a real person in a hostile world.
Right.
And you should.
And I think a lot of people respect that about it too. If anybody is really mad at Klabs, leave it in the comments below, and talk it out with me and or them, and we'll see. But I think from most people, you'll just get such high amounts of respect for running this at all, and like taking on all these, the I don't know how many accounts you log into every day, like, but that's insane. That's so cool.
There were so many at the end. It was a lot. Just let me make this thought more clear. Sure. I don't think there is an inherent meaning that we can understand to life, the life we live in this world. I think you gotta make your own meaning, and whether or not that it has importance to it, I don't really care if it matters. But my goal is to improve and other people's lives, make a novel experience for other people, make them think of things in different ways, make them think about the choices they make on their own. And I want that experience to be positive for the most part. And so when I had that sort of epiphany, it's like this is kind of a mean tabletop role-playing game because people get so harmed so often. It made me step back a little bit and think like there's other ways I can communicate these ideas, and even if I think this was a really cool experience, I don't think it's something I would do again, just because I think there's so much potential for people to get hurt, and justifiably so, if they put a lot of effort into a thing and then it failed.
But just out of pure interest, did you have people get like really mad or at you or sad from Candle World?
A couple times.
Okay.
I would say that the end part with Kenrick wasn't his fault at all either. There was like a third party kind of communication too, where I think Kenrick was justifiably disappointed, and so if people wanted to support him, they'd approach me about it, and they might have communicated in a way that was less productive than if I just immediately had a talk with Kendrick and reassured him. That was probably one of the lowest points where it's like, oh, this is not, I feel really bad. This is not, I do not like what this interaction. I want to just make this better. Earlier on it was less targeted, and so I think this was the moment where I was like, oh, okay. Sometimes people would mostly be mad at the entities, right? Early on, they'd be mad, like, oh, I got killed by this entity. Oh, I hate this entity.
Like, you're playing the character, right? That makes sense. But the characters you can see how they are and how they would react to things.
Right. But at the end of the day, I'm controlling the character. So and so when it comes to me, I'm like, oh, sorry. That's how the characters act. Oops. Yeah, they're kind of mean, aren't they? Let's talk. Because again, I was actually trying to set up something cool, but I totally understand how it was very it didn't feel great.
The first person to be permanently killed by an entity must have felt so weird.
It was strange. It was Retro Night and Planes in a Bottle. They had no qualms. They were just like, "Oh my god, we got killed. The visitor killed us. What the heck?
An honor." No, it's like,
yeah,
because you're the first. You're like, this is new.
It's crazy. And then Blue turned Pixt into meat to the point where he died, or they died. Oh, actually, another pronoun. I don't think Blue killed anyone other than that. The Marquess kissed someone and shattered them into sunlight.
What a way to go.
Marcus almost killed someone because they corrected their grammar.
I remember that.
All these characters are kind of jerks.
It's so good.
But it felt bad for that to reflect back on me, but it should reflect back on me to some extent because I created this world, I created its rules. And it was just like, if I'm going to run a role-playing game where I want to make sure everyone's having a good experience and everyone has agency to do cool things, it needs to be with smaller groups. And so if I'm going to do a big thing again, I just want to make it really clear to people going into it that if the effort you put into your character, you should have a cool idea for how you want them to die, because they will probably die. And then maybe make it easier to have a new character. Point, don't we? Yeah.
May I ask one last question before we end this one? And I'm almost certain, because there's so many things I did not get to touch on, and you probably too, that I'm certain we're going to do a second one of these. And I hope the people will enjoy that too, and even enjoy this one. But one last question that I've just written down here. What is your first memory of being creative or making games?
Oh wow!
In any way.
I'll ask you this the same after I answer.
Hey, sure, no problem.
When I was in elementary school, I used to take pieces of paper out and I would draw levels on them. And my first game, I think you can still find some remnants of it on my profile, but it was called Mushroom. It was called Mushroom Fighters.
Yeah.
And you would play a little mushroom with two little legs and eyes, and they would have different abilities. I have a game I think called Bunnis Nane.
Okay. That is inspired by that?
Yeah, you play as one of the mushrooms in it. But I had this whole world of little mushrooms. It's
that's beautiful.
6 or 7 years old. That's
Incredible.
The earliest I can think. I guess I can think before that. I had a game called Purple World. There's another paper game.
Yeah.
Lots of little clay characters, lots of little stuff like that. What was the first game you made, Nick?
Paper is definitely a good start there, because obviously I didn't have a laptop or access to a laptop until I was in late elementary school, I believe. Now that I think about it, we had computers in elementary school, but we would just go to Flash game websites, and I wouldn't really create, or you'd have half an hour on them or 20 minutes, and there were 20 kids in class that wanted to get their time on I don't know what. So it was also definitely working with paper, and there was the first memory of being creative, except for just drawing, because as a kid you draw a lot, of course, but I was drawing Monster World comics at a really young age, at early elementary school.
Same with comics for me. I had Klabss, the little piranha plant character.
Oh yes. And then this idea I actually got from my brother, where it was kind of a pen and paper adventure, but you had your little, so on an A4 sheet, or whatever the equivalent of that is in the Americas, you would scribble your character in the left corner, or on the left, and then you'd have a monster on the right, and you would have encounters basically against. You would run through a world, and then I'd have to think of okay, at this point, after beating this many monsters, you would get to a city with a shop and a smith, and you could buy new weapons, and from the monsters you got some items, or you got the horn.
Did you play Slay the Spire at this point, or did you know anything about it?
Well, so obviously Slay the Spire for a while come to exist. But
right, it's crazy. It's like your entire idea works in the Slay the Spire format.
The reason when making Monster World on Scratch, why I flocked to the Slay the Spire mechanics immediately was because I saw Slay the Spire and I thought, hold on a second, this is the perfect version of Monster World. Like, this is the most, like, this is the vision I had for Monster World that I didn't even, like, know about, right?
That's amazing.
It's so cool. And so it had to be something like that. And I want to talk about next time, because we're getting to the, like, 1 hour mark and whatnot, and that's a good time to end it. But next time I would love to get into, like, how while now working on Turanga for so long and even like going on a little like pause for it because of Super Fighter Tournament and stuff, you start to lose the connection to your project a little because you've been working on it for so long. You've become like almost a different person, and you're and this is what happened with Goomble Gurt 2, certainly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is that you've been working on it for so long that you forgot, or like not forgot what you had in mind for it, but you've got grown. So many new like impressions of games and ideas and things you could do with it that it does not even feel like you could not do it justice anymore with that. And that's what I want to talk about next time. For sure.
I want to say my final piece then on this.
Yeah.
Even if this feels like the most important game you'll ever make, at least where you are right now, and it feels like you want to do it justice, and you have so many ideas. I think one of the most important things ever being a creative is to be okay with it not being perfect,
being able to let it go.
Just if you can just finish a lot of cool stuff on it, you have an idea of how you want to get it done, it's okay to make something that isn't perfect. And I have to tell myself that with Goomble Gurt 2 as well. I'm gonna finish it, even if it's not the most. I don't have like 1,000 all the songs or original songs, or I don't have all like the graphical effects I want, or maybe I have to cut like one of the potential character ideas. Just make sure anytime you're working on a project, anytime you can actually release one, you are improving as a person, because your brain has completed this task, and when you move on to the next one, you're going to have all the experience and learn from all of the mistakes on the last one.
I think a lot of people need to hear this, and it's sad that it's so late into the episode. That not a lot of people will probably hear this, but if you're hearing this, that is some of the most like sound advice we've ever given on ScratchRunning.
That's also why, with Candle World, I made there was mistakes. There was stuff I wanted to maybe redo, some stuff I would have done differently, but I still really like it, and I'm glad I did it, and I'm not gonna stop working on it to perfect it. I saw it to its end, and now I'm gonna finish it with Goomble Gurt 2.
Exactly. To everyone out there, think of your project as like an entry into a diary, right? You're not the same, like it's not perfect, and if it stretches on for too long, you can't write like a diary entry like on one entry for years. Of course some things take time, and I've noticed that with even Super Fighter Tournament, which has taken so much longer than I thought it would.
Give yourself credit. That actually, like with the new recent development, so much has happened so quickly.
It's true. It's always like when a new like big chunk comes into play there, or when a new like big thing happens, it always feels like I can see the finish line now, right? It's getting like much closer, and that feels so great. It's such a great thing. The CPU is one of the like coolest things we've added.
I'm really happy, but I'm glad you added a CPU.
I just today I did some great stuff. I worked on different like difficulty levels for the CPU.
Oh yeah.
I did some extra things, so like the characters actually use their like combo attacks to get back on stage here and there. Not perfect, but there's always, as you said, I think one of the most important things we need to see in our creative projects is that you can absolutely let them, be not perfect.
Yeah. And part of just releasing it as well, imperfect, is you can come back and fix it if you want to. Like, you can come back and add more to it, but just getting it out, I think, is just a really important part of growing and creating.
I've gotten that quote from, what is it, from the Nintendo guy that says, a bad game is forever... No, wait, you know which quote I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Where he says, like...
So, like, you post a bad game, you rush a bad game, it's bad forever, you wait...
Yeah. But
I don't,
it's eventually good. But, like, that quote probably happened during the time where people were still giving out, like, cartridges.
Yeah, it did.
You could not
There was
update.
no online updates. You can update stuff now, and you can't... These are free games. We're not selling early access $60 games and scamming our users and slowly, like, improving on them. You post your game, work on it. Just do what's gonna make you get stuff done. I actually started my create-a-thon. I don't know if you saw it.
I saw that. I wanted to talk about it right at the start and completely forgot. Klabss create-a-thon. Talk about it.
Make something. Yeah, I don't know if this will even be out by the time it's over, but you gotta make something. You got 2 weeks to make something. I'm gonna just pretend like Goomble Gurt 2 is due in 2 weeks and get as much done on it as possible. It probably won't be finished, but it'll get a lot of work done. So that's gonna be my motivation.
That's a great way to think about it. The Klabss create-a-thon, if this does not release by the time that is still going on, then... so be it. I hope we got some cool stuff out of it. And I even thought about entering. I just it would have probably just been like some artwork or anything or something. So we'll see. But I think Klabss, and you may see it similarly. What a great first episode this was.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm not concerned about like feedback from people at this point. Usually I would say like, hey, tell us what you thought about it. But no, just like talking about this stuff, for me personally, felt really great.
Yeah.
That's all I can say right now. The rest is out of my control.
No, I had fun too. And I hope you all enjoyed listening. That was the first episode of SRDev with me, Klabss, and my co-host, Nick. Nikolai Ackfellard. I hope we all see you in the next one.
Correct. Until then.
The recording is stopping now.
What?